You're listening to Payments Innovation, a podcast dedicated to helping business leaders navigate today's global digital economy. Looking to learn about the latest innovations within fintech and payments? You've come to the right place. Let's get into the show.
So hi, and welcome to, the new inaugural version or inaugural episode of Payments Innovation. Our new and improved video setting, live from, our bedrooms and our living rooms. I'm Richard Arundel. I'm General Manager and co-founder of Currencycloud. And I'm delighted to be joined by two of my fabulous colleagues. We've got Chris. Say hi, Chris.
Hello, world.
And Cara.
Hello.
And Cara, it's great actually to see you in a professional setting, because normally when I talk to you, you have your bar in the background. And
yes,
we can kind of tell what day of the week it is by how far the level of the spirits.
Exactly. But today I'm trying to be healthy. So if you want to follow me on my Peloton, feel free.
So listen, we thought we'd do a brief introduction. I think each of us are going to start running little mini-series on various topics. But we started talking about the Payments Innovation podcast, why we set up in the first place. And we actually set it up. We had our first episode kind of back in the end of 2017. I think at that point we were kind of talking to anybody and everybody in North America. And everybody can tell from my accent I'm not a native American. And having come over from London, I thought what was quite interesting is, the US is 5 or 10 years behind perhaps the rest of the world when it comes to innovation in payments and fintech. So I thought it was quite interesting to get different perspectives. But now we're trying to really laser focus on what's going on now and what's coming next. And I think with the COVID pandemic, I think it's quite interesting, especially in our space, because whereas innovation was perhaps a choice beforehand, now I think it's a necessity. And I'm probably going to turn over to Chris and when you're talking to customers, talking to prospects, kind of where are you focused? Where's the kind of interesting innovation coming from your side?
Yeah, so I think even just to go back to the behind 5 to 10 years, I think you look at the wave in the UK about like five years ago with the challenger banks, and you see that the US is a little bit behind, and I think a lot of that has to do with the regulatory aspect. Whereas in the UK you get one license and you can operate and passport to the EU and you operate as a challenger bank. But here in the States, it took a while for companies to figure out how to get to market without having, just how to get to market, whether that's go out and get licensed in all the states as far as money transmission. Do they apply for a banking license, or which obviously most of them are doing now is going through a sponsor bank. And then within that, I think from when I started, maybe 3 to 4 years ago, it's a space that we really didn't understand here in the US as far as Currencycloud goes. We tried to replicate what was happening in the UK, and as we dig deeper, you really figure out how many players are in the ecosystem. And to me, that's the most interesting, because there's so many opportunities there. In regards to the innovation side of it for the challenger banks, I would say you have that C2C, so you have the Varos of the world and the Chimes of the world that obviously have raised a good amount of money up to this date, but I think we're going to start to see a massive wave in the B2B side. And so that transformation to really serve that SME or even a larger enterprise in giving them tools to operate in banking services, and then maybe even offering it to their customers. So one of our customers, Mercury Business Bank, really operates at startups, and they give them a lot of innovative tools through API technology that their traditional banks won't provide them. And so to see that innovation go from the consumer and transform into the business sense, which adds in a lot more complexity. There's, the compliance is different. The different tools that you need to operate in regards to a traditional fintech is completely different than your typical consumer bank. And so really interesting to stay at the forefront of that and really see these acquisitions and funding news that are coming out. The recent acquisition of SoFi with Galileo is really interesting. SoFi's we're basically becoming a bank, and they're really taking in the processor and the program manager in that sense of it. So happy to transition more to a focus on my side, to really focus in on that ecosystem, to talk with sponsor banks, with their programs and the processors, and just get an idea of how they're looking at the landscape, how they value opportunity, and really looking at ways that they can innovate and stretch to further opportunities for themselves as well. So really looking forward to that, taking it more specific in that sense of things. And with that, I'll kick it over to Kara.
Hey everyone. I'm really excited to be part of this series as well, because I come from more of the traditional banking space where innovation has been honestly a little bit slower and much harder to adopt kind of best of breed ideas. And that's a whole episode I'll probably dig into, but not going to unpack that today. But in my newest role here at Currencycloud, which is the Director of Partnerships for North America, I'm so excited to really explore the partnership landscape in fintech in North America and how it really is such an ecosystem play. I think that in order to really deliver a lot of these best in class experiences, these different fintechs out there, they can't be everything to everyone, right? We've seen different types of companies try to build everything themselves and really kind of have a subpar customer experience for their customers. And I think the ones that have really excelled and exceeded are those that embrace partnerships and really take a look first at what should the ideal customer experience be, and then do a build buy partner analysis from there. And so throughout the series, I'm going to be speaking with a lot of different folks that are either current partners or future partners, hopefully, and talk about the different partnership models, really, and what does it take to be a good partner in this space. And I think the key thing there is that you have to align your corporations together, right? I think it starts at the top. What is the mission and vision of each of your companies, and do they align with each other? And then from there, it's aligning every single business unit within those companies, respective companies, to all ensure mutual success for that partnership. So it's not just about your technology talking to each other anymore. Having good APIs isn't going to cut it. You have to make sure that you're looking at it from a compliance perspective, a legal perspective, customer service perspective, marketing, sales, right? Every single one of those has to be aligned around the partnership. And I think that's where you start to see some really beautiful relationships start to shine in this space and in this ecosystem. I think the other interesting thing is around regulation too. So Chris, you touched on it a little bit, but it's so complicated here to try to become a fintech and regulate, get all the regulations that you need yourself. And so one other area that has really been fun to kind of see grow and unfold is around these partner banks or sponsor banks. So there's a handful out there. There's probably about 50 or so today. Some of them that are larger than others. Some have just a single brand, fintech brand that they're working with, and others have upwards of hundreds. But that's an area where you see the more traditional kind of community banks putting on their innovation hats and saying, what is it that we do best? And that is provide regulation, compliance, right? And that banking infrastructure, and then let the technologists do what they do best, which is build great technology. And then obviously the business people do what they do, which is market and create a great brand. So I'm going to kick it back to you, Rich. I'm really excited to be part of this series.
So I think it's interesting, and I look at, I guess, the world of innovation in three buckets, and you've got the challengers who want to become a bank or want to become a financial service company. There are challenges around that, but actually how they're doing it from a digital perspective is leveraging the ecosystem, working with partners who can get them to market quicker. I think then in the middle, you have these non-traditional FIs who are looking to offer some financial services to their customers consciously. So the Shopifys of the world, who are saying, actually, this is a core part of delivering a great customer experience and, controlling a lot of that value chain. And then all the way at the other end are the companies where actually, especially payments, is a critical part of the customer journey, but not necessarily part of their core competency. They kind of want to offer it, but they don't want to own it. And this whole concept of, I guess, embedded finance and embedded payments is really interesting. So I think where I'll be focusing is on those kind of last two. And that for me is kind of looking forward to the future around how people are kind of embedding this, all being driven I think, Chris, you touched on it. The consumer, the digitalization of the consumer is happening, be it through financial services companies, banks like Chime and Varo, or through software applications. I always use the example of Uber, Airbnb, etc. It's just within the application. But I think really the innovation that I'm excited to talk to people about is where it happens in the B2B space, because typically, especially when it comes to payments, it's quicker to probably FedEx your money across to Europe than it is to do it through your traditional kind of banking structure, which is crazy. When especially from a consumer point of view, I can send it, it's there instantly. So that's what I'll be focused on. I actually had a question for you, Chris. In terms of what you see as driving the innovation from the customers you're speaking to. Now, I've touched on customer experience, and we're not going to make this about COVID and about the pandemic. As I said it earlier, I think people's hands are being forced. But why this sudden jump? For the last 5-10 years, the US has been in kind of this analog space. I always find it quite interesting that now they're talking about, oh, this is great, and we're starting to get more digital. We now have contactless on one of the lines in the subway in Manhattan. The Oyster card came out in the UK, I think, in like 2002. So I find that quite amusing. But why do you think there's this sudden drive for digitalization? What's behind that? What's driving that?
So I think it's happening with every other service, right? And so if you think about like how you watch TV, you go through Netflix or you go through your streaming provider. How do you shop? You shop through Amazon, on your phone. And most of your applications are done that way. So why isn't banking done that? And I think as the consumer, becomes their lifestyle changes and becomes the expected changes from all of their providers. And then in the banking world, the bigger banks just didn't transform fast enough. And so the transformers come in, and they really, figure out how to make a statement. The problem I think previous was that no one really knew how to break down the bank. It was more of like a battle. There was no opportunities for partnering. They were treating fintechs as a threat, and I think that's significantly changed, because it's inevitable that they're taking away market share. And so it's about, and it's a smart move by those the smaller community banks or the less revenue banks. How do they compete and how do they get revenue? And this is one of the models, is that they leverage out their license, and really what they become is an infrastructure. They don't need to deal with the end customer. They have a challenger bank on top of them that are selling their services, and they're getting the deposits anyway. It's a smart move by the banks, and you'll see like some of them are becoming more tech friendly now. So you got one of our clients, Radius Bank. Now they're starting to offer APIs, and they're going to win more of that business. And then I think to capitalize on what you said earlier as far as the consumer space, you think about a consumer like us here. How you operate with your financial services and how you buy things, and like I said, watch movies and things like that. We're not going to accept that at the business level anymore. And so when you go to work, your 9 to 5 should not be any different than outside of work. And so the way that operates, the way you send your invoices, the way you make your payments, the way you buy or interact with other businesses and things like that, that all needs to be digitized. And it will, because the consumers are going to drive that in the business. And so we're at the front lines, having those conversations and really seeing those innovators come in to really try to win that market share and really educate the customer, saying that it's out there. And I think the biggest change, as I mentioned, in the last 5 years is the banks basically opening up to a friendly partnership rather than seeing us fintechs as a threat. And our partner bank here in the States, Community Federal Savings Bank, I mean, look at their portfolio. They serve like a good 50 programs, and they come with open arms. Now it's not cheap by any means, but neither is going to get regulated on your own, right? And so it's
a downside cheaper than and quicker than going your own route of getting state by state regulation. millions of dollars and years of time to go and do that. So
exactly. And then news last week is pretty shocking to me. Is the Goldman Sachs Amazon deal? It's really exactly what we're doing in the sponsor bank world, only at a higher scale, right? I mean, they're providing lending services to Amazon sellers, so they're essentially an infrastructure for Amazon to do lending. It's exactly what we're doing on the fintech level at a higher scale. And so you really think about it, like it's happening across all spectrums of market share, 100%.
Yeah, it's like they're kind of finding a good place for themselves, to operate as that underwriter, I guess, and especially in the US, where regulation is so tough, and it'll be interesting to see, I think, especially in your world, Cara, how these partnerships start to evolve and how long that lasts for. And it might be a happy kind of equilibrium between processors, banks, fintech companies. Who gets greedy? Who wants to move into space? And I've seen it in different parts. You have issuers, you have processors, and you have issuer processors. So would you become a kind of bank issuer processor, fintech, banking as a service kind of layer? It's really interesting. So I think that there'll be some interesting conversations you're going to have with people in that space.
Absolutely. I mean, it will be very interesting, especially because, again, speaking a bit more about what bank tech has looked like in the past decade or beyond, right? And you see some of the exact same thing happened, right? Where you had a lot of these really innovative bank techs that get scooped up by the Fiservs and FISs of the world, which is, I mean, listen, that's a dream for a fintech owner, right? That's a great exit strategy. But as these behemoths get larger and larger, does it start to stifle innovation? And so that's, it'll be interesting to see. Right now, this industry is so nascent in terms of the sort of the fintech world, with the partner banks and sponsor banks. But as it grows, as the players, as they say, the cream rises to the top, and it'll be interesting to see, will consolidation start to happen? But we're just not there yet. So this is kind of a fun wave to ride right now in terms of may the best win, and we'll get to see that unfold.
Currencycloud is an online payments company that makes international money transfers fast and simple for businesses. We're building a borderless future where international transactions are seamless for a better user experience. Discover the world's most trusted payment platform and our toolkit of developer-friendly APIs at currencycloud.com.
You've been listening to the Payments Innovation Podcast. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe now in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Thanks for listening. Until next time.